Hello and welcome back to the show. As you're all well aware by now, the United States has finished its withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the results have been nothing short of an absolute catastrophe. Pretty much as soon as the United States began to leave, the Taliban reconquered most of Afghanistan, just as we'd predicted, of course, and reinstated their theocratic, oppressive, and totalitarian regime once again. Now, I voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 election because I had hoped that he would be a breath of fresh air after 4 years of an isolationist and non-interventionist foreign policy under Donald Trump. And to say that I am disappointed would be a massive understatement. Joe Biden's heinous betrayal of the Afghan people, repulsive caving to the enemies of humanity, and total disregard for the millions of Afghans now condemned to live under one of the worst regimes in human history is a testament to the utter destructiveness of isolationism and underscores how far gone from reality this country's political discourse is. Now, in the wake of this abhorrent decision by the Biden administration, there has been a backlash not just from liberal hawks like myself, but even moderate Democrats and Republicans who wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan but didn't want to endanger the millions of people living there. If it were up to me, of course, we would never have withdrawn in the first place. But if you're going to withdraw, you should at least do it in a careful and deliberate manner, something this administration did not do. On the flip side, however, you got goons like Kyle Kulinski. Oh yes, old Kremlin Kyle is gleefully wallowing in the chaos and misery of millions of Afghans, barely managing to hide his bulging erection at the inevitable prospect of more Taliban war crimes against civilians who are simply fighting for the human right to be free. And Kremlin Kyle has now taken to smearing any critics of this atrocious decision by the Biden administration as pro-war neocons or whatever. Well, enough talk. Let's buckle up and take a look at what this rancid cockroach has to spew from his intellectual sewer.
So Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell and a bunch of conservative Republicans went on the Sunday shows to talk about Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, and they're going on the offense. They're making a bunch of terrible arguments. Let me show you what Mitt Romney said, and then I'm going to respond.
There's a political slogan, end endless wars, but that doesn't translate into a serious policy decision. And the real policy is this. You can't, as one party, end a war. It takes two parties to end a war. The Taliban and the radical violent jihadists in the world, they haven't stopped fighting. They're going to continue to fight us. The war is not over. We're just no longer in a place where the war had its apex, where the Taliban was able to allow al-Qaeda to grow and to attack us on 9/11. We went to Afghanistan because we got attacked on 9/11 and lost thousands of American lives. Now America is more in danger. The reason we have a military is to protect America. And by the decision to pull our military out of Afghanistan puts us in greater danger. Don't forget, we went to Afghanistan to knock down al-Qaeda, but we stayed in Afghanistan to make sure they couldn't reconstitute to attack us again. So pulling out means we are less safe, and also recognize the war is not over. We're just in a weaker position. We don't have boots on the ground. We don't have eyes on the ground. When they say, look, we have over-the-horizon capacity, that's a fancy phrase. What does that mean? It means we're not there. The nearest American air base is, 1,000 miles away? I mean, I had eyes on my over the horizon on my teenagers, but that meant I had no idea what they were doing. Likewise, this idea that somehow we're still in control is not real. And America is in greater danger.
So I hear you saying that you think we're less safe for leaving Afghanistan than if we have stayed. Do you think that we are less safe now than we were before we went into Afghanistan 20 years ago?
Well, I think that's hard to measure, but we're certainly less safe than we were when we had a group of, let's say, 5,000 American service people in Afghanistan standing up as the backbone behind some 250,000 Afghan troops who were keeping at bay the Taliban and other terror groups. That made us a great deal safer. And by the way, we have thousands of troops, tens of thousands of troops in Germany, in South Korea, in Japan. Why are they there? They're there not as favors to those countries, but because we believe that keeps us and the world safer. And the idea that we would keep several thousand troops in Afghanistan as long as necessary to keep us more safe is, of course, the appropriate policy to take. But these political slogans come in the way. End endless wars. The war is not ended when only one party pulls out and the others are continuing to fight, and now fight with more aggression. Look, going forward, we're going to have to recognize we're in a much more dangerous position, and we're going to have to invest, I'm afraid, more resources to keep ourselves safe.
I've heard that argument before about the fact that the U.S. service members are stationed in Germany and Japan and in South Korea. But it's also true that they're not being killed by IEDs or by an insurgent group And you know, I've talked to, look, veterans like everybody else are all over the map when it comes to this decision and this horrible week and this and that. But I've talked to some veterans, conservatives even, who say, I'm glad we're getting out. I don't want any more Gold Star families created.
Yeah, the reality is we're even have a greater reason to main troops in a place where there is hostility, because those people are going to bring their hostility to America and to Americans and to our friends, whether we like it or not. The idea that somehow we can pull out of a dangerous place where radical violent jihadists are organizing, that we can pull out of that and that's going to stop them, well, that's fantasy. They're going to continue in their effort to regroup and to come after America. Don't forget what they did on 9/11. The reason, again, we were in Afghanistan was to keep another 9/11 from happening. Now we pull out. And the Taliban is much stronger than they were before, in part because of all the armament we've given them. ISIS-K is now alive. The old ISIS that still is in Syria and Iraq, they're stronger. These forces of hate that consider America the great Satan, they're still out there. They're still fighting us. That war, unfortunately, goes on. And the idea that we pulled out of one of the places that was essential to push back against them is an idea that makes me far more concerned that had we retained a small footprint there to support the people on the front lines, the Afghan National Security Forces, that were doing a pretty darn good job.
What Mitt Romney said, really, is 100% accurate. I find it funny that anti-war progressives like Kyle think that just because the United States pulls out of a region means that we've ended the war. I find that to be utterly ridiculous. The war in Afghanistan is still going on. The only difference is we're not involved in it anymore. And we've already seen the consequences of not being involved in Afghanistan anymore. The Taliban have completely taken over the entire country. Millions upon millions of people are now being condemned to live under a regime whose brutality rivals that of even Nazi Germany. I'm not kidding. The Taliban regime from 1996 to 2001 has one of the worst human rights records in recorded human history. I think we owe it to the world, not just Afghanistan, not just to our own national security. We owe it to the world to make sure these people never get into a position of power ever again. But of course, I know Kyle's not going to do that. I haven't seen what comes next, but I already know exactly what Kyle's going to say. And it's not because he's right, it's because he's predictable. He always has the same stupid retorts to any of these legitimate concerns that hawks or even just concerned people bring up.
The Afghan forces were doing a pretty darn good job, Mitt Romney says. Where have you been the last 3 weeks? Do you have no idea what happened in the country? Do you have no idea that we supposedly had 300,000 people who were fighting, and then they instantly dropped their guns and ran and went to Tajikistan?
Yeah, Kyle, it's almost like the Afghan army's main supplier and main ally started withdrawing around that time, which obviously would have caused a huge decrease in morale, obviously would have left the Afghan army very underprotected. What did you expect them to do? Now, I'm not going to pretend like the Afghan army is blameless in the catastrophe that unfolded, but it's also understandable. What do you expect people who have relied on the United States for over 20 years to do when they're suddenly abandoned right out of nowhere to the wrath of a dangerous terrorist organization? Do you expect them to put up a good fight? Do you expect them to do that? No. They were in chaos.
The so-called president, who's just a puppet president, took over $150 million and ran out the back door with it. $150 million in cash. The government imploded instantly. Now, yeah, there were 1,000 or 2,000 elite-level Afghan fighters who cared and were really trying to stand up and make a difference, but that ain't enough. They weren't doing a pretty darn good job. Maybe the 1,000 or 2,000 were, but the 300,000? Are you kidding me? And he's pretending like, oh yeah, that kept us more safe.
It's funny because what Kyle is saying is actually a good argument for why we should have stayed. Obviously, our mission in Afghanistan was not complete. If the military and the government fell apart this quickly, that, I think, is the clearest evidence as ever that our mission was not complete yet. We still had a job to do. And what Joe Biden has done is just abandon Afghanistan without even bothering to check if they were ready to fight on alone or not. And we have seen the consequences of that.
I don't know if he's just a moron or if he's a liar, but man, if he just doesn't understand that it was a fake military. He's dumber than I thought.
What an insulting and vapid thing to say. You know, over 70,000 Afghan soldiers gave their lives, not just for their country, but for the U.S. troops who supported them throughout this 2-decade-long conflict. And Kyle is just pretending that they were a fake army that just gave up. What did you expect them to do when their closest ally abandoned them just like that? It's absurd that Kyle really believes that the Afghans don't care about their country. They do. But they were left completely powerless after their closest ally abandoned them right the fuck out of nowhere.
So, I mean, I love this. He literally, his first thing he says is he attacks the idea of ending endless wars. Mitch McConnell said the exact same thing on a different Sunday show. This means there was a meeting of the GOP caucus where they all agreed, all right, so we're going to go out there and argue for endless war, correct? Correct? And they were like, yeah, let's do that. Let's argue for endless war.
Wrong, Kyle. Wrong. Mitt Romney isn't attacking the idea of ending endless wars. He's attacking the slogan itself because it is misleading and because it is just a simple buzzword that completely lacks nuance and context. Nobody, absolutely nobody is pro-war. I hate it when non-interventionists try to paint people as pro-war. Nobody is pro-war. But some people, but people like me, liberal hawks, we understand that military action is necessary to prevent a much larger war. If anything, hawks are more anti-war than the anti-war movement because we want to preemptively prevent a war from breaking out.
Because they're saying the same thing. They're all attacking the, quote, slogan, end endless war. He says that doesn't translate into a serious policy decision.
And he's right. That's not a serious policy decision. End endless war is a stupid slogan that lacks any context, it lacks any reasoned analysis of the situation in Afghanistan. It's just a stupid buzzword they throw around that sounds good on a poster. That's really what progressivism and populism as a whole is. It's just it's meaningless phrases that sound good on a poster but aren't actually a coherent policy. And Biden, unfortunately, is kowtowed to these populist elements within our government and people like you.
What do you mean it doesn't trade? It is a serious policy proposal. It means let's get out. What, it's only serious when you're a neocon and an imperialist and a hawk and you occupy places illegally for decades? That's the only thing that counts as serious?
Oh God, he did the meme again. The war in Afghanistan was far from illegal, Kyle. We were attacked. We were attacked on our own soil by terrorists harbored by the Taliban regime. We had every reason to invade Afghanistan, and we didn't go in there alone. A whole coalition invaded Afghanistan to take out the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. This wasn't an illegal invasion. In fact, this actually went before Congress. It's something that Kyle always whines about. He always whines about Congress not voting on military action. Well, they did this time. Guess what, Kyle? Your side got one vote. Everyone else voted to invade Afghanistan. And that was the right decision, because we had been attacked on our own soil by terrorists harbored by a hostile foreign power. If that's not a proper justification for an intervention overseas, I don't know what is.
What a joke, man. What a joke. He says, well, it takes two parties to end a war. Mitt, I got news for you. Al-Qaeda is obliterated in Afghanistan.
Absolutely, completely, 100% false. Kyle's really going to play this card. Oh, the Taliban is gone, or the Al-Qaeda is gone from Afghanistan. Bullshit. They just welcomed the leader of Al-Qaeda in that region back into Kabul with an armed escort. There's video of it. And you honestly believe the Taliban are going to uphold their end of the bargain? Even if they agree, even if they don't back Al-Qaeda, which they've already shown that they're still going to back them, they'll just back another terrorist organization in that region. There's no shortage of them. You have the Islamic State there. You have the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. You have Taliban splinter groups. You have the Haqqani network. There are so many terrorist organizations out there dedicated to the same cause that Al-Qaeda has: the destruction of the West and the mass extermination of people who don't follow their particular branch of fundamentalist Islam.
There's fewer than 100 al-Qaeda operatives left there, and that was as of a decade ago.
Yeah, guess what, Kyle? They fled over the border into Pakistan when we intervened. And now that we're gone from Afghanistan, they're going to come right back. Al-Qaeda's numbers will skyrocket. And we'll be right back to square one, with Al-Qaeda having a base of operations in Afghanistan harbored by a friendly government, and we will have sacrificed 20 years of war for absolutely nothing.
So, and the Taliban, for anybody who knows geopolitics, they know this. The Taliban is a guerrilla army. They have nationalist ambitions. They don't have global ambitions. They're not a global jihadist network.
Okay, their domestic policy alone warranted regime change. As I've said before, the Taliban government in Afghanistan had brutality that rivaled that of even Nazi Germany. Human rights were less than non-existent there. People were shot on the street for no reason. Women were relegated to being third-class citizens. There was no freedom of speech, no freedom of the press, no freedom of religion. It was an oppressive, murderous, and barbaric theocracy that committed genocide against ethnic and religious minorities. That alone warranted regime change. I don't give a damn if the Taliban don't have global ambitions. They shouldn't have any ambition whatsoever. They shouldn't control a single square inch of Afghanistan. And I think Kyle, again, is missing the main point. The Taliban might not have global ambitions, but they're harboring people who very much do. Al-Qaeda is a global terrorist network, and I believe that any government or any group that grants them safe harbor is not a legitimate government, and we should take them on wherever and whenever they emerge.
Now, ISIS is, but the Taliban has been fighting ISIS for years now. And again, you would know this if you follow this stuff closely.
Then why are you opposed to the United States fighting the Islamic State in Afghanistan and in Iraq and Syria, Kyle? Don't pretend like you're suddenly in favor of specific U.S. interventionism. I can't find a single case of United States intervention that you actually support. You whined about us intervening to fight ISIL in Syria. You whined us about fighting them in Iraq, in Africa, and in Afghanistan. And the Taliban, I understand the Taliban and the Islamic State are enemies, but at the same time, I really don't believe the Taliban is really dedicated to fighting the Islamic State. They're more dedicated to establishing their theocracy.
So if the idea is, oh my God, we need to make sure we protect America, well, mission accomplished, because the Taliban is in control in Afghanistan. They're the mortal enemies of ISIS, and they're going to fight each other. So there's not going to be some jihadist network that's growing in Afghanistan. That's utter nonsense. That's not true.
Oh yeah, because the Taliban has such a great track record of fighting terrorists who threaten America. Did Kyle just seem to forget that the Taliban harbored Al-Qaeda, the very same terrorist organization that perpetrated the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history? Jesus Christ, this guy is beyond naive.
And by the way, even with 9/11, the idea we got to go there to attack them. Most of the hijackers, 15 of the 19 hijackers, were from Saudi Arabia, our top ally who you want to arm and you want to fund. You want to give weapons to them as they build radical mosques all around the world.
This is a common tactic with Kyle. Always deflect to Saudi Arabia whenever you're losing the argument. Now look, I'm not a fan of our alliance with Saudi Arabia. But to pretend that they're somehow the ones responsible for the attacks of 9/11 is utterly ridiculous. Saudi Arabia had outlawed Al-Qaeda years before 9/11, and Al-Qaeda has actually perpetrated attacks against Saudi Arabia. Now, is Al-Qaeda funded by some wealthy Saudi business people? Probably. But what's his solution to that? Does he want us to regime change Saudi Arabia? Does he want us to cut off our alliance with them? And that still doesn't address the main reason we entered Afghanistan. The terrorists who attacked the United States were not being harbored in Saudi Arabia. They were being harbored in Afghanistan by the government at the time, which was controlled by the Taliban. That's the reason we invaded. And I guarantee you, had Saudi Arabia been the ones harboring those terrorists, we would have gone in too.
So it's all a joke. We ought to stay there to make sure that Al-Qaeda can't reconstitute. There is no Al-Qaeda there anymore. It's ISIS and the Taliban and ISIS are going to be at each other's throats and they're going to be fighting each other.
What an absurd oversimplification of the Afghanistan conflict. You really think Al-Qaeda is gone for good? No, they're going to be coming back, and in fact, the Taliban has not lessened their relationship with Al-Qaeda in the 20 years since our invasion. Al-Qaeda is going to be back with a vengeance, and it is going to be infinitely more difficult to combat them now.
And by the way, there's a lot of threats in a lot of places. Should we invade Somalia now because they have Boko Haram is there?
Wrong fucking country, Kyle. Boko Haram is in Nigeria, not Somalia. I think that stupid, snide comment really underscores just how uneducated Kyle is on foreign policy. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And isolationists don't really need to know what they're talking about, because their entire ideology is based off of ignorance.
Is that what we should do? You know, there's a lot of threats in a lot of different places and a lot of bad guys in a lot of different places. That's not an argument to stay there permanently.
Actually, Kyle, it is. We have the right, in fact, we have a prerogative to intervene in places where human rights are at stake and our national security is at stake, wherever and whenever these threats emerge. Should we invade Somalia to oust al-Shabaab? I think that's the one he was trying to refer to. Yeah, I think we should. I think we should be involved in there. Trump pulled our forces out. I would like to go back in. Nigeria, same thing. I think we should be involved in Nigeria. We should be fighting Boko Haram and trying to curtail their ability to launch terrorist attacks, not just against the United States, but against countries in that region. Why is Kyle advocating that we just ignore it?
There's going to be a lot of sloppy, gross arguments like that you hear from various Republican politicians and various corporate Democrats. But just understand, at the end of the day, it comes down to ending endless wars being a bad idea in their opinion. That's what it is.
Yes, Kyle, because it is a bad idea. It is a vapid, brainless slogan that has absolutely no nuance, no analysis, no strategy to it. It's just a meaningless slogan that you put on a sign. End endless war is such a vapid, meaningless statement. How do you define endless war? How do you what constitutes an endless war to you, Kyle? This war was going to end. Had we stayed and had we continued our mission, it's very likely we would have prevailed in the end. But now we'll never know, because Joe Biden did the stupid decision to pull us out of there and abandon Afghanistan to the very people who nearly destroyed it. And for that, I am absolutely, completely disappointed and disgusted with this administration. And there will be consequences for this. I hope the Democrats get absolutely destroyed in the midterms for this. And I will be voting for those who call out this administration's serious missteps on the global scale.
So notice, he's criticizing the withdrawal, but he didn't have anything to say about the 20 years of grift and greed and corruption, where the military-industrial complex got phenomenally wealthy, and people in the military were like, there's no goal. What are we even doing here? This makes no sense.
Except, Kyle, there was a definable goal. Eradicate Al-Qaeda and eradicate the Taliban and install a more democratic and more free government in Afghanistan. We failed in that objective, not because we were militarily defeated, but because people like you politically sabotaged our intervention. Because people like you whined about endless war instead of actually proposing a coherent strategy to win the war. People like me are not pro-war. Liberal hawks are not pro-war. But you know how we want to end the war? We want to win it. And this was not an unwinnable war. Don't pretend like this is an unwinnable war in the slightest. The Taliban have been greatly reduced in size and in power and in territorial control. And we threw all of that away with this short-sighted and stupid withdrawal plan. Biden has set Afghanistan and the world back decades with this horrible decision.
He had nothing to say about any of that. Nothing to say about us allying with warlords with child sex slaves. But now he's all outraged because we're pulling out. And because that's leading to some problems on the ground. The problems were going to happen whenever we got out. Whenever.
All the more reason we should have never gotten out, Kyle. All the more reason we should have stayed and finished the job instead of leaving halfway through it. Kyle is inadvertently making an argument for more interventionism, not less interventionism. We should have stayed in Afghanistan, and the catastrophe that unfolded is proof that we should have stayed in Afghanistan.
But Mitt Romney probably knows this, and so his opinion is just never leave. Just stay there permanently. Well, guess what? If we stayed there permanently, we would have violated the peace agreement and the ceasefire.
Good, that was a stupid peace deal to arrange. The idea that you can make peace with the Taliban is outlandish. It's predicated on the assumption that the Taliban are rational. They're not. You don't make peace with the Taliban for the same reason you don't make peace with Nazi Germany, or you don't make peace with the genocidal regime in Rwanda. These people aren't open to peace. They don't want it. They want oppression. They want misery. They want genocide. They want to commit crimes against humanity without recompense. And that is precisely why we should have stayed in Afghanistan, to prevent these bad faith actors, these malevolent forces of evil, from taking power again.
And the guns would be hot immediately. And so then you'd have way more U.S. soldiers dying and way more Afghan civilians dying. There was no status quo of just staying there forever and everything would be okay and there wouldn't be any more casualties or what have you. That wasn't an option.
Yes, it was, Kyle. When we were there, the violence actually went down. In fact, we hadn't suffered a combat death in Afghanistan for almost 2 years until we decided to withdraw. Then we suffered combat deaths because this was a stupid, short-sighted withdrawal that immediately led to chaos, just as people like me predicted.
That wasn't an option. So they're leaning into it. They're leaning into their pro-war take, and it's annoying because it is possible that some of this stuff could land.
What a stupid thing to say. Like I've said before, nobody is pro-war. Nobody. Liberal hawks like me want to end the wars by winning them. And this was a winnable war. We were making progress. Biden threw all that progress out down the drain because I don't know why. He just did. And what Kyle says about some of this landing, oh, I hope it does. I hope we get some sensible liberal hawks back into power, because I am sick and tired of isolationism dictating America's foreign policy. I am sick and tired of non-interventionism being the go-to for every U.S. foreign policy decision. I'm sick and tired of that, of Americans sitting in their ivory towers watching the world burn while they have the power to make a difference. I'm tired of that, and I want that to change.
The American people, 63%, want to get out of Afghanistan. They think that's the right policy. But Biden only has a 25% approval rating when he got out.
Yeah, it's almost like the majority of Americans aren't very well educated on the conflict in Afghanistan. That's not to say that all Americans are stupid. It's just to say that they don't have a nuanced understanding of the conflict in Afghanistan. Therefore, they can't make a reasoned judgment call on whether or not we should stay. And I think that Biden's drop in approval rating shows that when people who want to withdraw from Afghanistan actually see the consequences of withdrawing from Afghanistan, they change their minds and realize just how disastrous this kind of policy will be. And I want Biden's approval rating to continue to tank. Maybe it will convince him to change his tune in the future when we come across similar conflicts. I hope one day he does something about Syria. Since this withdrawal from Afghanistan, however, I'm losing hope that Biden will ever be anything less than an isolationist grifter. But, we'll have to see.
So these guys are just exploiting, what they view as a weakness of Biden, and they're going hard in the paint. But God, they're the worst. They had nothing to say about Afghanistan during the 20-year war. But now that we're pulling out, oh my God, obviously we should stay in. Obviously we're trying to keep us safe, trying to keep America safe. I don't know if he really believes that, but if he does, he's so naive to not understand that this has to do with opium and the trillions of dollars in mineral wealth and Russia and China.
Oh my God, really? He's going to that card, really? Yeah, Kyle, we're there for the opium, a drug that whose import we've actually banned. Yeah, we just go into Taliban purely for that and for the mineral wealth. Has this guy ever read anything about what Afghanistan actually exports? You know what their main export is, Kyle? Grapes and nuts. Grapes and nuts, really. That's what Afghanistan's main export is. If we wanted opium, we could have easily gone to Pakistan or just gotten it from one of our allies, like in India or something like that. The idea that we've intervened in Afghanistan for its mineral wealth is ludicrous. This is not a cost-effective way to obtain resources. It's just a bullshit conspiratorial talking point pushed by non-interventionists when they're losing the argument. And that's precisely what Kyle is doing here.
And defense contractors getting wealthy. To not understand that, again, I don't know if he is lying or if he's dumb, but either way, this commentary is beyond idiotic.
Oh boy, what a ridiculous note to end this video on. Well, I didn't think that I could think any lower of Kyle before, but, you know, he constantly amazes me in how shitty his takes can be. I think this video should just stand as yet another example of how brainless, how incoherent, and how ridiculous isolationism is as a foreign policy. It's incoherent, it's disastrous, and it has catastrophic consequences, as we've seen in Afghanistan. And I'm extremely disappointed in the Biden administration's approach to Afghanistan. I expected them to be more nuanced, to be more careful, to be more deliberate. But I think, I do think there's a silver lining in the chaos that has emerged in Afghanistan. I can't think of another example in recent memory that has so fully exposed the disastrous and catastrophic consequences of isolationism and non-interventionism than the humanitarian disaster in Afghanistan. That should stand as a permanent testament to the legacy of non-interventionism. What's happening in Afghanistan is all completely the fault of isolationists and non-interventionists in the United States government, and whose ideology of ignorance is propagated by people like Kyle. Kyle is, in the end, yet another example of how ridiculous and how distorted our political discourse is when it comes to foreign policy. And I hope this is not going to be the future of American political discourse. I hope one day we can return to an era where we had liberal hawks and humanitarian interventionists running our foreign policy, running our government, people who wanted to help the world when they saw it in trouble instead of turning their backs on it. And God willing, one day they will. I hope maybe one day this isolationist fad will die out in this country and we'll return to some sense of reason and normalcy. But until then, let this video and let the consequences of the disaster in Afghanistan stand as a testament to the incoherence and immorality of non-interventionism. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for joining in, and until next time, peace out.